sientes soledad y por la noche sientes soledad. Por más que rías sientes soledad, por más que mientas sientes soledad. Con un gustito agridulce en la boca ella luce preciosa aunque llores madera. Con sus caderas que se bambolean, las penas de adentro se van para afuera. Y llora, trocitos de madera. La niña misionera no para de llorar. Llora la pena de su tierra, moviendo su cadera, no para de bailar.
Una niña de 9 años llora trocitos de madera. El inicio de las extrañas lágrimas tuvo lugar el sábado pasado y desde entonces la niña no cesó de segregar el material.
Llora, trocitos de madera. La niña misionera no para de llorar. Llora la pena de su tierra, moviendo su cadera, no para de bailar. Y llora, trocitos de madera. La niña misionera no para de llorar. Llora la pena de su tierra, moviendo su cadera, no para de bailar. No para de llorar. No para de bailar.
Sound of Pigeon podcast.
Son of Pigeon podcast.
Hey Ali,
Hey,
welcome to Son of a Pigeon podcast.
thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a great honor to have you here, and I would like to introduce you. I prepared some points that I think those who are listening would love to know before we even go to those depths. So thank you so much, first of all, for coming here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Me
I love
too.
it.
So those who are listening, pay attention. So Ali was managing a record company in Buenos Aires. She also produced festivals. You were a radio host. That was your first job, now that you told me.
Yeah.
And that's what started the whole love for music and to talk with people and to manage them. You also had workshops for international and like governments and also private philharmonics and
All different stuff.
all different stuff.
All different stuff.
So no philharmonics, everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And you also have now, you're the founder of Free Radical Production, which you consult and you manage teams and musicians. And you're also the co-founder of Women of the World, which is networking for women in the music industry, which is incredible. And you do so much. And also the cherry on top of this, you had a podcast for the BBC.
Yeah,
This is
yeah. A
incredible.
long time ago. It was
The fucking BBC.
they were doing a series of different countries. I think it was an Argentina travel series about music and culture. And so because I go to this music conference called WOMEX, the World Music Expo, every year, through my BBC contacts from there, they knew that I was living in Argentina at the time and working in music. So I put something together for them. And I love podcasts and radio. That was sort of my first love in the business. So I'm so happy to do it when I get to produce it and to be a guest whenever I'm invited. And it's a blast.
Yeah, it's a blast to have you. You have beautiful energy. And
Thank
also
you.
the fact that you're able to do so many things and you have such a beautiful resume that is serving you everywhere you go. And I love to talk with people like you. And I love to give stage to all the experiences that you had to experience in order to get to this point. So I'm curious to learn more about you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I find it's so interesting, and I'm so glad you have this podcast, because I feel like those of us who work in music on the stage or behind the scenes, it's usually multifaceted hustle that we have to live,
Yes.
And so there's, sometimes musicians are also doing other stuff in the business, or there's managers who also produce festivals, or everyone does a bunch of different things. And I think it's really important, not just myself, but to share our stories so we can sort of lift each other up and give each other ideas.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's not easy being in the business that we're in, and we're here because we love it. So the more information we can share of how to make it work is always helpful, I think, for everybody. It's been very helpful for me, for sure.
Yeah, I think this is the power that we have as a collective humans. 1+1 with humans, it's not 2. We get 3, 4. It depends on the people.
Exactly.
And this is the best we can do, just to share information and to teach each other from our experiences. At the moment, you're also doing band therapy.
Yes.
And you're also managing bands, but you're very limited with your spots because
Yes.
you don't really like to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
tell
that's
me,
funny. You're smart. You picked
Yeah.
up on that. I can't remember if I told you that, but yeah, I have been managing bands for over 10 years now. And while I love it, and it was really sort of my main entree into the music industry, even though I was doing things before, it was really sort of the main work that I was doing for many years. I absolutely love it. And I think there's something really special about the work of working with musicians, especially independent artists, and really helping their dreams come true and helping take that music that you hear and you're like, wait a minute, this is something special. People should be listening to this in Morocco, in Japan, in Bali. And, it doesn't matter what language you're speaking. There's something very authentic and true about this music. And let's take it as far as we can take it. And let's do the best that we can together. And while I love that, it's very hard work. Being a manager is hard. Even when you have, I've been really blessed to work with wonderful groups who are so grateful and respectful and wonderful to work with. And the groups that I still work with, I only do because they're like my family and I'm so passionate about their projects. But to manage another person's artistic project is like having a baby. You're always wanting to think 24 hours a day, what more could I be doing to help their strategy? What more could I be doing? The job is never really done. And there's something about that position that, although it's been beautiful and it's served me for many years, it drains you in a lot of ways. There's a certain time when you're a parent and the kids move out of the house. I feel like I got to that point where it's like, okay, I've been doing this and nourishing other projects for a long time. And that's actually what brought me to Berlin. I really was so inspired by the music scene here in Berlin, touring with the bands from Argentina where I was living, and going to Fusion Festival for the first time, and Bardentreffen, and all these different festivals, especially in the German scene, that were so diverse and highly creative.
Diverse in what way? The culture-wise?
Cultural-wise, lineup-wise, even just those two examples, like Fusion Festival, which is so wild for those of you who don't know it. Maybe some of you here do. It's a giant music festival, I think around 80,000 people, is it? In an former Russian air base, where as different art crews have all the different hangars that were abandoned and create different stages out of them.
There are like 8 to 9 stages.
Yeah, and I'm
Something
sure with small
exaggerated.
ones even more. It's gigantic.
Yeah.
And everything from the attention to detail is really what stood out for me in a lot of these festivals. Everything from, you get, it's in sort of a foresty area. So you get lost in the forest and you bump into a tree that has about 30 head scratchers hanging from it. So people would stand there massaging their heads and having conversations with the person next to them. And so there were all these tiny little sweet moments and attention to detail that were really excellent and top experience design. And that's really where I kind of got interested in this whole world of creating wonderful experiences for people with music, with culture, and just being so inspired by the festivals I was seeing here and seeing all of these wacky, creative, spontaneous, beautiful moments and things that they created and memories that they allowed the audience to create. I was like, I need to move here and I need to learn how to do this.
When was it?
That year, my first year at Fusion was touring with La Yegros in 2013. And it was really a beautiful moment because this year, 2023, now living in Berlin, I was working at Fusion at the Backstautzen stage. And so that was a big honor for me, even though
The first time you went there, you were working there.
No. So
No.
actually, yes, I'm sorry. I was tour managing for a band that was playing. And my being there and being so inspired, I was like, wow, I need to move to Europe to work at these festivals. And so it was such an honor to be working there this year, to be like,
Crazy.
wow, it's so interesting to see this massive creative operation from the other side, from the
Yes.
inside.
And you were in Buenos Aires before that?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the US. I studied abroad in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And
You have any ancestors there in
No,
Argentina?
and I
So you're
love
completely US citizen. Where were you born in
100%
the US?
gringa, Connecticut, USA.
All right.
And I love to confuse people about that because I really like to fly under the radar. After living in Argentina for so many years, I have a pretty strong Argentine or porteña, as they call it, accent. So I love to trick people when I'm traveling and just say I'm from Argentina. And it's very funny because I was just in Spain on tour with my band FÉMINA, who I manage, and I was just tour managing their quick 2-week tour so we could spend some time together in Europe. And I was in a small town, Nerja, that I went to visit after the tour, where I had actually studied when I was 16 years old, and thinking, okay, it's Spain, there's some Argentines, but I speak in my very Argentine accent in Spanish. And when people ask where I'm from, I just say Argentina, especially in Spanish-speaking places, because they usually can't tell the difference, or they think I have Argentine parents or something like that. And both times it happened, it's usually with like a waiter or a taxi driver, people you don't think you're going to see again. And even when they had Spanish accents, they're like, you're from Buenos Aires? Where in Buenos Aires? I was like, wait, I've been caught. And so they thought I was Argentine, but
Funny.
But they were from Argentina too, living in Spain. I was like, what are the odds the 2 times, like between my taxi driver and at the restaurant? So I get called out sometimes. But yeah, Argentina is a very big part of who I've become and a part of my heart always, even though I don't live there anymore. So I studied abroad there in 2007, 2008 as a part of an exchange program through my university. And then I went back for a few months or maybe a year, and then I stayed 9 years.
Wow. So this is where you got your Argentinian
Exactly.
DNA. Okay.
Lots of practice. And so
Crazy.
I just moved from Argentina to Berlin right before the pandemic, actually, almost exactly 4 years ago, which is pretty wild to think about. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Argentina is a big part of me and still is, and I still work with a lot of artists from Argentina, and it's an amazing place. It's an amazing place, and the independent and underground music scene there is one of the coolest, most richest musically that I've ever experienced. And so being there is where I really got inspired and wanted to manage artists because there was so much talent that I was thinking people from other countries need to hear this. They need to know this. Like, this should be everywhere. And so we went everywhere. And that's what we did.
What is the job of a manager?
Oh, that's a great question.
It's a very foggy thing. We have so many thoughts about it and so many myths. What is a manager is doing?
Exactly.
And I think if you ask 10 musicians what is a manager, you will receive 10 different answers.
And I think the truth is, if you were to ask a manager, what is a manager, you'd get 10 different answers as well. Because it's almost like a relationship. Like no two relationships are exactly the same in terms of what that means for the other person. So really how I see it in a professional context is that a manager is almost the avatar for the artist in the business world. So if I'm managing a group, let's say FÉMINA, this group I was just on tour with, and I'm their manager, I handle all of the business of FÉMINA as a band. And I act as FÉMINA. That's why I say avatar. I act as FÉMINA and I make decisions in representation of FÉMINA in the business world in terms of finding a booking agent, helping make some career decisions. And if there's something that I don't know what would be the best decision for the band, I then go back and refer to the band and ask them, hey, what do you guys think about? Should we do this date or this concert? What do you think? And then I go back to the business world and I say, this is what they want to do. So I'm basically there in representation of the artist in the business world. What does it mean on a personal level? It's like, if we could say, like, as we said, having a baby, it's like having a baby, getting married, all of the above rolled into one.
With different people.
Yes, with different people, with multiple people who have different agendas and life schedules and commitments and needs and wants. And so balancing all of that and really, I really feel that it's a beautiful service to be a manager because you can see a creative project and you work in the service of the music, in service of the people making the music, in service of the network and community surrounding the people that are making the music. I've been touring our last big tour before the pandemic hit with FÉMINA. We were touring with a 1-year-old baby and a 7-month pregnant singer and the baby daddy. And we've been to Bali when we went to Bali, everyone wanted to bring their partners. We had, I cannot remember how old Maya was. She was a few years old. We were a crew of 8 basically for a band of 3. With the babysitter, with everything. Yeah. So it's
How long was the tour?
The one with FÉMINA was 5 weeks. The Bali one, I don't remember because it was broken up a bit. We first went to South by Southwest and then ended up going to Bali and Australia. I want to say 3 weeks. But yeah, it's a lot. So that's why I sort of talk about these big crews, because there's moments where the personal life comes into it a lot as well. Because when you're living on the road, people need to bring their kids with them or their partner, or they can't tour all the time because of their relationships, partner, other jobs. People have different wants and desires. So you're really an integral part of their life if you manage sort of holistically, which I think is the way to do it, because different artists have different needs. There's artists that tend to be maybe younger and hungrier. Age doesn't even really always have to do with it. And they want to be touring all the time. And they want to be traveling all the time. And maybe that's their priority, and their relationships are not as important as their career, at maybe even in a certain moment in time. And their strategy is completely different than 3 mothers or 2 mothers in this trio that we had. So it's a very different dynamic. And so your strategies in terms of how to best serve the band and serve the music, sometimes those are conflicting interests too.
Yeah, how come? Can you give me an example?
Oh, I have a great one. With FÉMINA, we were just finished recording their 3rd album with produced by Quantic, a wonderful British producer, and Iggy Pop had a collaboration on it. Yeah, cool. That's a crazy story.
This guy is strong motherfucker.
He's hanging in there, man.
He's a Mick Jagger. I think they're gonna live forever.
Yeah,
Somehow Ozzy Osbourne,
He will. No, he's a legend. And
he's a
super
legend,
kind and generous person also. So we recorded the album, and one of the girls in the band found out she was pregnant. She wasn't planning on being pregnant, and she found out that she was pregnant. So we had this whole campaign to be touring all the time and be supporting this album, and then we just couldn't. And all of us in 6 months were out of a job for a while because that had been one of our main sources of income for all of us. And it was like, oh, okay.
The touring itself was the main source.
touring and really just sort of the whole income of the band. But touring was always, especially pre-pandemic, that was always the heavy hitter. So there's things like that where you're in this interesting role where the band becomes sort of like your family and you're like, oh, of course, this is so fantastic. And we're all celebrating as like aunties of this beautiful baby to be. But also from a career perspective, you're like, hey, how are we going to promote this album now? How are we going to make this work? And you make it work and you figure out how to make it work, you know, but sometimes compromising the personal life and the professional life is always trying to find a balance. And that's actually a lot of the things that I work with my clients in band therapy now, about trying to find that balance, because the music business is a very harsh and difficult place to be. Or actually, I want to correct that. It can be. And it has this reputation where there's this glamour around struggle when it comes to the arts in general, but especially music, you know, starving artist, starving musician. I'm touring all over and I'm sleeping in my van and I'm late nights and being burnt out and
committing full power.
Yeah. And just like there's the glamour and the sacrifice. And I find that while it's a very noble career to share your art and share your voice, at what price is really the question. And the price is different for every single person. And there's some people where their joy is doing it that way. And there's some people who say, you know, I would like to have a family, or I would like to not be burnt out touring all the time, even as simple as that. That you really, when we do band therapy, a lot of times is I don't always ask, okay, what is the best thing you want for your music? It's really tell me what your ideal life would look like.
Yeah.
And that could mean I'm living in Berlin. I have a great apartment. I'm spending a lot of time in the studio. I only go on tour, you know, a few times a year. And I live really well from that, because it's when you're helping a creative project with its strategy, it's super important to know I think it's to shoot for the end goal and work backwards. Because success in the music business, I think, is different for everyone, where for some people it's touring all the time. For some people it's being able to live from their music. For some people it's not. For some people it's they want to enjoy being an artist and have more financial security. For some people they don't want to be on the road all the time, but they do want to be able to make money from their music. So it really varies. And I think for as everyone's voice is different, everyone's vision of success is different in their own way. So I think as an artist, it's really important, or even as any creative human being, to define what success looks like for you and really like envision it. Like where, as a lot of times when I talk with artists, I'm like, tell me your day from when you wake up in this ideal world of everything working out for you in your music career. I wake up, I'm in the studio, I'm here, I get to spend time with friends, I have time to exercise, or I'm playing a stadium in Japan, and that's what would give me the most joy. Because we do music because we love it. You know, no one is here because they think they're going to make millions and millions of dollars. Welcome if it does, right?
Well,
welcome
that's the ideal,
if it does.
The dream, the big one.
It's ideal if it does, but no one decides to go into music because they think that is the easiest way to make money, because we know that it's definitely not, even though it is always within the realm of possibility. But I feel like those of us behind the scenes and on the stages who work in music, we do it because we love it and we can't imagine life without it.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
If that's our goal almost, then, you know, how can we, if your goal is to get joy from being creative, then let's make the whole life joyful, right? Because if you are playing your music, but you're burnt out, you're tired, you're abusing drugs and alcohol, you're miserable, you don't have a partner, you're estranged from your family and friends, that's not the point. That's missing the point.
Yeah.
You know? So it's all about finding that ideal goal for each person and building a strategy and a life towards heading in that direction. And you get as close as you can get, and sometimes you get even bigger.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think is the things that musicians are doing or not doing that basically holds them down?
I think that looking at things in the sort of like short vision, I guess you would say. The sort of short-sighted. There's definitely a better word for this. But being sort of short-sighted and getting caught up in the day-to-day stress of it, which is super normal. But if we're talking about like what is the number one thing clients come to me for with band therapy sessions, which I should clarify, by the way. So I do consulting for artists. The program is called Band Therapy, but it's not only as one would think of it as like, oh, the band's in a fight and we have band therapy.
It's not like Metallica.
No. It basically started as sort of a fun concept because managing bands in Argentina and taking them to Japan, Bali, Australia, all to these different places, as you know, the word gets out. And so everyone would come up to me and say, oh, do you want to get a coffee and talk about my band? Or do you want to manage my band? Or I need advice with this. And after like 100 coffees, I said, I really love this. I love to help artists. And I can't have a management roster of all of these artists, but I love being able to help them achieve whatever they want to achieve and share advice and share strategies and tips. And so the concept of band therapy came up where after all these coffees, I was like, okay, I somehow need to charge for this service because I'm spending all my time doing it as much as I want to be helping. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great to just have sort of like a therapy session where we both come in, we sit down, we talk about your problems for an hour, and then you go home. And I don't have the responsibility of having to manage the group all the time. And it has been totally transformational for me because it's, as opposed to management, which often can be a more draining process if it's not in the right balance, especially when you manage many acts, which is why I only do it in sort of minimal specific cases now where I find that I'm nourished by the projects. It can be very draining. And so there's something about band therapy that has a lightness to it and a freshness to it where artists come in and it's a new artist, it's a new problem, it's new music. And I feel like I have so much energy and motivation to give them advice so that they can really use and we can work together. I have some clients where I meet them once and that's it. They just want sort of a read on my advice for their project. I have other clients I meet once a week. I have other ones I meet once a month, or they have an album coming out. We do a few sessions to help with a specific thing and then they call me if they ever need it again. I always like to make it as accessible as possible to the artist. So it fits into budgets for independent artists that they're not locked in or committed to something that makes them uncomfortable financially in any way. And so, yeah, it's been wonderful. I mean, we were just speaking just now. I had a session this morning before the podcast with an amazing artist from Israel, Uri Atzur, who does a lot of song circles and has very interesting formats of how he structures his career outside of the system. You know, he's tours around the world giving workshops and playing festivals, but he isn't on Spotify. And he's just figuring out now how to enter into that. So I was just telling him, I was like, I am so inspired by hearing your story. And then here's my advice of what I would do. But there's an exchange that happens that's really beautiful. And I feel like the more clients I have, the more I'm energized and inspired. And I have even more information and ideas to share with everyone. So I do one-on-one sessions. I also do workshops, something that's really cool that if this were to ever interest any of you, in Berlin, there's a very wonderful organization called Music Pool Berlin, that if you are a Berlin resident, they subsidize a lot of coaching sessions, workshops for artists who are here. So I believe it's only 30 euros for a 2-hour session, which is pretty fantastic. So if you're an artist in Berlin, check out Music Pool and all of their offerings. They have so many things that I do my band therapies as a part of their coaching sessions. They also have everyone, if you need help with lawyer, publishing, anything. They have such a wide resources of coaches that can help, workshops that they do that are all either free or very affordable, subsidized price.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description so all of you can scroll down wherever you're listening.
Yeah,
see the link and check it out.
It's fantastic.
Do not procrastinate.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Exactly.
Cool. So what are the skills that a band need in order to survive this musical chaos, or let's say the music business chaos that is out there?
Oh, yes. Sorry, got off on a tangent about going back to your question in terms of what are some of the main, pitfalls that happen and what are some ways to solve them. I think that in our day-to-day life, most musicians, especially independent musicians, have other jobs, have other things going on, have social lives, have personal lives. And it's very hard on top of that to have the constant motivation and energy to be excited about their project and be funneling their energy into their project when it doesn't always give them the financial returns to compensate for their time.
Yeah.
And so I think that figuring out what it is that gives you joy about your project, whether it's playing live, whether it's when a fan writes you and is like, wow, I saw your show, or I found your album on Spotify or on SoundCloud and it really inspired me. Find out those moments that make you feel as an artist, this is why I do what I do, or whether it's jamming with friends, whether it's being in the studio, what are those moments that bring you the most joy, and how can you basically figure out the ways to delegate other responsibilities or find ways to compartmentalize or to schedule or find a way to deal with the things that aren't as easy for you, so you can focus and remind yourself in those moments of struggle, in those moments of tension, and does anyone care? Should I be doing this? That this is why you do this. Remind yourself over and over, because it's very easy and very common to get swept up in but my social media, and am I going to release this, and who will listen, and who will even care? And it's important to really keep yourself on this marathon of creative production, to not forget that, and finding out ways for each person to really realize what brings them joy and how to make that as big as possible and make the other stuff as manageable as possible. So the positive is outweighing the negative for you to continue forward.
Yeah. You talked about delegation, which is very powerful, because with delegation, we can leverage what we're doing. However, the budget musician does not have sometimes the budget to pay for delegations. Do you have any solutions about it?
I think it depends on what it is, right? Because there's one of the things I hear most often as artists coming in, and they say, I hate social media. I don't want to post on social media. I want someone else to do social media, or I can't, or I feel super obligated. And I think that everything in your career, like, you are an artist and I'm listening to your band because you have an original voice, right? No two artists are ever exactly alike. And I listen to your band as opposed to that other band over there because you have a unique voice and something to say that is never going to be the same as anyone else who has ever existed and who ever will exist.
Yeah.
So in terms of like thinking about that unique voice, what people really feed off of is authenticity. No? So I really connect to artists, and I think most of us do. It's almost like a human sixth sense that we have in terms of when someone is being real and when someone's not. So when it comes to social media and people feeling bogged down in that and being like, oh, I can't, sometimes this is controversial because obviously there's different algorithm things that people always encourage you to keep up with. But my view is like, post when you have something to say. My teacup agrees.
Special effects.
And when you don't.
Yeah.
And if there's share something when you're excited to share. When you're not excited to share, don't share. Because if you're not excited to share, I'm definitely not going to be excited to be listening, you know? So finding out different ways to bring authenticity into the process and support when you can. And also it depends on what it is exactly that you're delegating. But first of all, there are people that can help manage your social media. If they're on a budget, sometimes it's accessible, sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are people who work on percentage. Sometimes it's simple things like, I find actually one of the biggest things is that sometimes artists just need a space to vent, which is also how band therapy came about. Like they're stressed about this and they have this album release and they don't know what to do and they just need advice and they just need someone to sit with them who knows the business to be like, this is normal, this is okay, this is what you need to work on. And that's something that we do in the sessions. But if that's not available for whatever reason, make groups with other musicians. Have accountability sessions, meet up for
this
coffee.
is powerful.
Like really even just being with each other and sharing information, sharing tips, helping each other out. You know, maybe there's a friend of yours who is really great at social media and you're not, and they can offer some tips, and you're really good at accounting and figuring out the taxes part of it or the visa part of it, and you can share some information. Just as you were saying before, it's really how can we share our knowledge to make things easier for one another? So even if it's not so much in the financial delegation way that you can hire a whole team to support you, you can always be creative in how to find that support. Because I think that musicians communities, artist communities, and creative communities are really spaces where people can support each other and do support each other because we know what we're up against.
Yeah, definitely. And I would like to bring up a little tip for all of those who hate social medias. So if you're a social media hater, it's time to write down something. There is a tool, it's called Metricool, and it's a great tool to schedule posting.
Nice.
And you can do it, you don't need to pay money. You can register for free, and you can have like 50 posts a month that you can do it for free. And it's like having a person that basically does the social media for you. You just need to sit down maybe one day, and you can schedule your whole month.
Nice.
And it also requires a little bit of planning ahead. So this is something that I also encourage people to plan as much as ahead as possible. There is a different method if you're planning to do something in 6 months or if you're planning for 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's a different infrastructure. It's like when you want to build a bungalow house, you know, it's very easy. But if you want to build a skyscraper or a big castle, you need different foundations. So this is about the planning as well. And yeah, just try to leverage as much as possible. There are many free stuff out there in the world. Metricool is one of them. You can use AI today that can serve a lot of the copywriting. About to think, what title shall I give this post or whatever. You can just ask ChatGPT. It's also completely free. So I think there are not so much excuses in this area that we're living in. We have a lot of tools to use.
Yeah, we have more tools than ever, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The industry is very different also in terms of what it brings back to us.
Oh, yeah.
But I think there's always opportunities for resilience. And I think that the world is really so much of what we reflect out to it. So I think that if it's so much about mindset, and we know this in so many different ways.
That's the ultimate mindset. It's what separates.
It's everything.
Yeah.
And so if we're like, oh, it's hard. If you are saying it's hard to be a musician, I'm stressed out, I'm this is difficult, change your story.
Yeah.
Change your story. Even if you don't feel like it's true, to be like, hey, I'm a cool musician. I'm living in Berlin or wherever it is you live. And love doing my art and I'm doing what I love. How lucky am I that I get to wake up and have a project to even be stressed about, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's really being a musician and it's not for everyone. I don't do it. I so honor that those who do, you know? Sharing your voice and having musical talent is something that's so special that not everyone has. And it's a great blessing and gift. Yeah. And if you are so lucky that you have it and you have something to say and you have something to share, you know, bringing it from a place of gratitude as opposed to, you know, just always resetting. And I know that it's super normal to get bogged down at, oh, but I have my visa paperwork and I have this and I have that. And now I also have to prepare and promote for this show. But always bringing like a wild horse, you know, just bringing it back, reining it in all the time. Be like, remember, this is what you feel like you were born to do and you get to do it. How lucky are you? And
I think also all those challenges that comes around, this is what life brings us as a test.
Exactly.
And I believe those tests are there to make sure we are strong enough to go for the next level. Because every time we want to go up for the next level, we need some mental strength and we need some tools that can help us deal with all this energy that is coming to us. Mm-hmm. And this is why I believe those who are not, who cannot basically go through this, you know, I see them as a Super Mario bosses, all those challenges. And if you cannot go over this boss, you will go again and again through the same situation, but in different scenarios until you will figure it out, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there is a concept that you brought in one of the podcasts that I really like it. You called it the shit sandwich.
Yes.
Would you like to expand on it a little bit?
Absolutely. And I think that that's relates a lot to what we were talking about. I got it from a book that I really love called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which I recommend that all creative people read. It's a very light and easy read, but it talks a lot about the creative process and creating and has a lot of great tips and ideas and different strategies. But basically what she was saying is that there is a shit sandwich in every job. Everything, even the most amazing job, being an ultimate rock star, supermodel, actor, whatever it is, whatever you think is the most ideal dream job in the world has negative sides to it. And so that's the shit sandwich, as they would say, of that job. And you need to choose a job, whatever your job is that you are willing to eat the shit sandwich of whatever that situation is, to the point where someone else is sitting next to you and be like, oh, but I'm so stressed and I don't know if I want to do this. And you say to them, are you going to finish that? Like you have that motivation to sort of to keep going in the same. I mean, there's so many situations, even when you think about being a parent. It's something that so many people want, but there's a lot of difficult things that come along with that. But, you choose those problems. You have to remember that you chose those problems. If you want to be a musician, there's a lot of challenges that come with that, but you want to be a musician. So you have to be willing to eat that shit sandwich. And if you're not, then you find a different job. I always say it all the time, if you were interested in making loads of money, go quit being a musician, be an accountant, be a banker, go work at a big bank and do whatever to just make lots of money. It doesn't mean that you can't make lots of money being a musician. Of course you can. But if you aren't willing to go through those challenges, you need to, and for some people, they're not. And for some people, it's a mix. There's what is success to you? That's why I always come around to this question, because there is this sort of romanticized image of musicians that they are only successful when they are fully living from their music. And to me, that's not the definition of success. It's great if you can, but it's also creativity is very ephemeral. And I think when you force it into a professional setting, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always. And so for some people to have another job on the side or to have other streams of income is really important for their emotional and financial stability. And that's perfectly okay. To me, that's still success. When I talk about my career in the music business, when you said, oh, you do so many things. Yeah, because if I was just managing bands, it wouldn't be enough. If I was just working at festivals, it wouldn't be enough. That's why I do a little bit of everything. I vary the projects that I have, which also keeps me alive and interested and excited to have different types of things going on, where some are more creative, some are more logistics, some are more strategy, and it keeps me on my toes. And I like that sort of a rhythm, that's how I make it work. If it was, am I a failure as an artist manager if I'm not 100% doing artist management? No, I design my life as I wish,
Yeah. Even though you do many stuff, I think you're still focusing on musicians and to give service to musicians. Mm-hmm. And this focus is very, very important. And I think that focus is what makes us great at what we want to do. And it's great to have many sources of income, but this focus that you have on musicians, this is what makes you so good about it, because you gather this knowledge and information for decades, right? And you compound it. What I like about the shit sandwich, it reminds me of a concept by Alex Hormozi. You know this dude?
No.
He's incredible. He's really business kind of guy who simplify everything, and he gives it away for people for free, just so they can make $1 million as an income a year, or 1 to 3 million, and then they can work with him because he helped those people to get to those amount, right? So he just releases all the knowledge for free, so you can get to this knowledge, and then you can work with him, and he takes like 50%, and he gets your company to 10 million or something like that. And he's incredible. There is something that is very, very important that he says. It's called uninformed optimism. So basically, you go somewhere, and then you hear one of your friends telling you, oh, I'm a musician and I make this and this amount of money and it's amazing. You must be there. It's so crazy. We go in concerts in the whole continent of Europe, and then we go to the US and South America. This is crazy. You must do it as well. And you think to yourself, yeah, I will do that. So you start doing that. And then there is a big peak of excitement because you think, that's it. I'm going to be musicians. I'm going to do touring and everyone will recognize me and I will have the ultimate validation from the world. And then you realize it's called informed pessimism. And then when everything goes down, and then you realize there is a shit sandwich that you need to eat. But what separates those who are successful in what they're doing and those who are not successful is that if you eat that shit sandwich and you continue, and now you have informed pessimism. Informed pessimism. It gets me confused sometimes, the English. But what you can do otherwise, you can go to a different subject or a different profession because you might find there is a better opportunity there. So you want to quit eating the shit sandwich, but then you want to go somewhere else where it looks a bit more shiny, a bit more golden. So then you lose the focus that you started already with the music just to go to where it's more shiny because there is uninformed optimism there. And once you will start it, guess what? You will see the shit sandwich coming and you must eat it. And I think the more people will focus on one thing and you can put all your effort into one thing. So if it's a musical project, just have one band. That's it. Go with that until you become big enough so you can have another project. Mm-hmm. If you already have one band, maybe you can make your performance better, so try to find something and just make it better. And get more focus there. And I think that will help people way more and then just go around and jumping into different stages and different hats and different professions. What are you thinking about this?
Well, I sort of do, I guess, like a combination of both because I think that one of the smartest ways to succeed in a career in the arts or actually could be anything is that finding especially I'm talking more about the example of being a freelancer, right? Or of having, putting it together in different ways with different projects, not just like one full-time job in an office. But if you have different hustles that are related to each other and support each other, that's sort of like a hack for things to grow exponentially. So for example, my work as a manager and as a tour manager, managing, going on tour with the bands, would introduce me to festivals, which then when I wanted to work at the festivals, I had those contacts.
Yeah.
And then by now working at more festivals, I have more contacts to help my management. And then by speaking at conferences and getting invited to speak at conferences, which is where I do the Women of the World at Womex and other ones, I then, by being there to speak, I'm getting contacts to either work at festivals or for the bands I manage. And then I'm, at a showcase for one of my bands, and then I get invited to speak somewhere else. So it all kind of helps each other build up. And I think that there's lots of ways to do that if you're an artist as well, where, for example, you can be a regular musician, you can have your project, you could also be touring in someone else's band to help create income in that way. So maybe as opposed to getting just a regular job at the library or whatever it is, you are rehearsing, you are playing, you are getting more experience being on stage, you are making contacts, you are at venues that you could play yourself later. Also, I have people who, a big thing that a lot of my artists in Argentina would do is they do music for TV and film or even jingles. And so that's what they would do is make music for other more reliable income streams and use that income and invest it in their projects. Yeah. However, during the day, they're with instruments all day, they're composing, they're writing. Obviously, it's a different outlet than just their creativity, but they are being creative. They do have their instruments in their hands and they are practicing and moving forward every day and helping with the other part of the business. Yeah. So there's a lot of people who, I think that's one of the smartest things you can do is vary your hustle in avenues that support each other, because then they're not completely unrelated, which sometimes to have a mental refresh can be good. But I find with my sort of multiple hustles, that's what I love. If I were to only be doing band therapy all day, all the time, I would maybe get a bit burnt out by it. That's how I felt with management. When I was really only doing management, it really burned me out a lot because it takes a lot of your energy and time. But as soon as I started doing less management and then doing a bit more band therapy and a bit more of festivals, and then sort of as the seasons change, where there's a high season for festivals, that sort of ebbs and flows. And that keeps me engaged in what I'm doing. I just finished tour managing with FÉMINA for 2 weeks in Spain, and I loved it. But when I was touring with them all the time, I did not want to be touring all the time. And I got super burnt out. And I wasn't being as good of a manager as I could be because I was burnt out by only working on their project all the time. So I can now be better at that job by doing my other jobs and bringing the resources from my other jobs to them.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you manage your schedule?
Ooh, that's something I'm always trying to get better
at.
It's really a challenge. And I will be honest with you, I've been trying to slow down more because as I've been really studying more health and wellness and giving workshops on health and wellness for artists, I need to walk the walk, and I want to walk the walk. And I understand so much, especially as a solo female entrepreneur, where you always feel like you need to be doing just to survive. It's hard to have time for personal life, have time for exercise, have time for solo time. I just took a 2.5 days vacation at the end of the tour. Was the first vacation I've actually taken in a very long time. And I answered more messages than I wanted to, So I think that really just trying to take baby steps. I think there's a great phrase that I love from kind of a spiritual writer, I guess you would call her, Gabby Bernstein. Inspired action clears the path. So sometimes I feel that even if it's not, okay, I'm going to take a huge vacation, I'm going to do a whole creative retreat that I wanted to. I was like, Allie, you're moving too fast. You just finished your high season. Do something even small. Take time to do a yoga class a day. Even if you think you don't have time to go to the studio, just put on a little video for 20 minutes. You always have time for that. I meditate and journal every single morning to sort of come back into balance so that I have freshness in my head to put my schedule together.
Yeah.
And I really try to eat well when I'm on the road with bands, really trying to...
That's challenging to be on the road and have good food.
Exactly. Like writing it in your rider, trying to be strict and not just like eating all the chips that are all around the dressing room, It's a marathon. Life is a marathon. Even forget about music. But when you're doing lots of projects, the more you take care of yourself and your body, the better you are. And I'm really trying to make adjustments to my life and my lifestyle to always accommodate more to that. I think we're speaking right now off of finishing a very active high season where I was much more out of balance last summer with it than I was this summer, because I think last summer was the first real summer post-pandemic that the festivals were really fully open and hiring. And so that's why I moved to Europe. And everything closed down pretty much immediately for the pandemic. And so now that things were open, I took all the festival jobs that I could get. And I got completely burnt out and sick by the end of it. I had strep throat. I was on antibiotics. I was exhausted. And this year I was like, okay, I'm going to do better. And I had bigger roles in less festivals and I would be there for more time. And I find it was actually a really great experiment because I would be in places. For example, I was just working at Book to Träumer Festival. We were producing the live stage there, and we were there doing the whole build and design of the stage and everything for about 2 or 3 weeks. But when you're there, you're outside of the city, you're living on the lake, you're working, you have the catering making food for you every day, and you're trying to have there be usually vegetarian options or healthy options. And so I find that it's a lifelong quest, and it's all about trial and error and really being self-aware and self-reflective of like, okay, I went a bit too far now. Now I'm going to really reel it in and take a few days break. Or, okay, I was on the road and I didn't get to eat as well as I wanted to. Okay, now I'm going to adjust and do the best you can. Like you can't always be perfect, and you have to be generous with yourself. It's
exactly. Different grays.
And also just like when you talk about schedule, just everyone is really different in terms of what works for them timing wise. I don't like to do meetings first thing in the morning. My brain is still super foggy, and I like to have super slow mornings where I have my tea, I meditate, I journal, and like I don't really like to have calls before 11. I prefer to do them in the afternoon because that's when my brain is more active and I do a better job at what I do. So I prefer to start later and end later, you know?
Yeah.
So it's really about being smart about finding what rhythms work for you, especially if you're like a solo entrepreneur or musician who makes your own schedule, and just being smart about it. So like, and trying to have some healthy boundaries around it, especially when I work with bands in all different time zones. We really try and create some boundaries of like, if I know it's really early morning there, I don't text them asking them for stuff. I send it over email so they don't wake up and see it first thing. You know, so really trying to make a balanced schedule, be tuned into your body and your rhythms of what works best for you, and just trying to be careful with your energy, like letting go of opportunities that you find drain you, and really being tuned into what opportunities you feel like give you energy and make you excited to work and, you know, make you happy. So just trying to find the best balance of all those things. And if I'm perfectly honest, I do the best I can, and I'm always adjusting. And I find so much of my job is helping people find that rhythm and schedule for themselves. And I find it's very easy for me to do it for other people and not always as easy for me to do it for myself. But I'm doing my best and I'm learning a lot. And it's always an adjustment, right? Every year is different. And also we
also change physically and we have different needs. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I also used to be like, I tend to be an overdoer and I always run around too much. And that's why it was really great. I'm so grateful for my life timing, even though it's been very sort of different and unique path and a bit of an odd bird. But, you know, when I was really tour managing and we were going on the road hard, it was from ages like 25 to 32 really. And so I was like ready to rock and roll and I was like, let's go, blah, blah, blah. And I really needed that energy. And a lot of the musicians in the bands that I was managing that were older than me, they were like, now I understand them a lot more. I'm like,
leave me alone,
I'm tired. So my needs now are very different than what they were before. But I also feel like I'm doing things much better and healthier. When I think about when I was like in my mid-20s on the road all the time, starting my company and super hungry and really excited and living my dream of traveling the world with bands, it was amazing. But I was so burnt out and I always ate healthy, but I really didn't like take it as seriously as I do now. And I've had some health things come up over the years that have really made me be much more conscious about my health in general, in terms of sleep, diet, exercise, just energy, mental health, all of that. So I think that I'm really happy for where I'm at and what I've learned. When I think about like, ooh, would I love to do that again? Yeah, there's some things that would be very fun, but I was always exhausted and burning myself out because I was just sort of like young and hungry and pedal to the metal with everything. Yeah. So, it's very different now.
Yeah, that's the experience that we have. You know, we try, we go over the boundaries, we cross some stuff, and then we see what comes up. And all right, now we adjust, or we don't adjust. And then and there must be a point of a lot of pain. And when we reach this point, we realize, okay, now it's time for something else.
And that's really what life is about, I think, with all things. It's like if we didn't feel discomfort, we wouldn't be forced to grow in a different direction.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, you do things in a certain way and they work well for a certain moment in time. And then, you kind of start to get uncomfortable, as we were just talking before we started about living in cities, where as before that would nurture me so much. And it still does in a lot of ways. And it's like, oh, wow, lots of events running around, so exciting. And then you get a bit older, you get a bit burnt out and you're like, is this really what's best for me? I'm a bit uncomfortable. Okay, body, mind, spirit, all of the above. Like this is, you're giving me signs here that this isn't the same. Let me like tune in and reassess, you know? And maybe my choice is still this, or maybe my choice is something else, or maybe it's happening slowly over time. But we receive a lot of signs on all the different levels, and
All
it's
the
just
time.
important to listen.
All the time, yeah.
Like even just for any part of your career as well, like noticing what makes you happy, noticing what drains your energy, noticing what people you love to work with, noticing what people aren't the best match to work with, you know?
Yeah.
Just tuning into that and being smart with your intuition.
I think what blurry our intuition is that, sometimes it's money decisions, sometimes it's professional decisions. And I believe when we make a decision because we don't feel like it, but there is some money benefits or some professional benefits to that, or some other benefits that we are not completely aligned with that, this is also one of those life bosses. And this is very important, at least for my experience, not to go there and to stand on the ground and to go with what is really my values and what I do believe in. In the long run, it can really fuck me up. And then I'm thinking about the stupid decision that I made. And I had many of this in my life. And then it's just not worth it. It's not worth it because then things not coming from the heart, they're not coming from a place of peace.
Exactly.
And the harmony about it, it's so different. It's not harmonious as I would like it to be. And then our thoughts, in the end, they're crystallizing to become our life.
Yeah.
And our emotions and the people around us and the experiences that we have. And it's so subtle sometimes. And sometimes we don't even know that we are there. But this is really my number one indicator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would like to go back to the scheduling.
Yeah.
Because I noticed you talked about more like daily schedule, but you have crazy plans. I believe you have already some schedule for the winter and schedule for the summer. How do you manage this? How far away in the future do you have your schedules?
Well, it's definitely loose, but I've been this will be my 3rd year now that I spend the winter in Mexico. And I'm there from December through end of April, which I find is really fantastic because when I moved to Europe in the first place, I'm so tied to Latin America in terms of my spirit and my work and all of the above, really working with Latin American artists for many years now. So the idea was that I would be based in Europe and still be working in the Latin American market. And so I thought that would still be going back to Buenos Aires, but it was really funny because I love Buenos Aires so much and I still do, but something happened. I remember thinking, oh gosh, the day I leave Buenos Aires, I'm going to be so sad and it's going to be so terrible. And then as soon as it happened, it was just like I woke up and it was just time. And the chapter had just sort of naturally come to a close and it wasn't sad and it was just it just fell into place in a really easy way. My visa ended up coming through to Europe in like an unexpectedly easy way and was like, oh, okay, the door is opening. I guess this is what's happening. And the same happened with Mexico. So I didn't want to be in Berlin in the winter and I wanted to still be connected to the Latin American market. And I heard that Mexico has a lot going on, especially post and during the pandemic. It was one of the only places that was open. So there was kind of a big boom with the arts and culture there. And so I tried it out 2 winters ago. This will now be the 3rd. And I fell in love with it. And I think there's so much going on there. I think it's really the other than Brazil, which is an absolutely huge and impressive market, probably the biggest exporter of music in the entire world, but it's sort of a very insular market. It's not as open to bands from other Latin American countries. For the rest of Latin America, Mexico is huge and there's festivals and venues and there are really interesting things happening in the music and the event scene there. Not on the same way as Europe, but it's a very exciting time to be there and be working there. And I love being in an environment speaking in Spanish and being open to new opportunities. And I organize some musical boat parties there that again happened in just like a very surprise random thing, but ended up being a really wonderful thing. And so I really go with the flow a lot because that's one of the reasons why I've always kept my business small is so I can be mobile to, I was working at Waking Life Festival in Portugal and it was like, can you just come to Portugal for a month? And it was like, yeah, I'm there, So I have sort of a loose idea of my year because there's now festivals that I'm going back over and over to really grow more and step into different roles there. So I know that most likely I'll be at Waking Life in Portugal and Book de Tremor next summer. spending some time there. And I know that I'll be in Mexico and doing some events there. But again, I'm very open to things changing. If a better opportunity comes up or a new opportunity comes up somewhere else that feels like a fit, I can totally adjust that plan. And that's one of the big benefits of being free.
Yeah.
You know?
Free and light, not just free.
Exactly.
Not to have extra weight so you can fly away wherever you want to be.
And so I like to have projects and things that I know I'm working towards and working on. And that also happens from investing in stuff over time. So now from having gone to Mexico for a few years, I know the market more. I have some events and things that I'm involved in already. But again, if someone, you know, I really love Mexico and it's a place I really want to be always spending more time and investing more time in. But if a crazy opportunity came up in Thailand that I wanted to go, I would go. So always open to the flow of life and wherever it takes me.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you don't resist, then you have a lot of energy to support. Mm-hmm. Yeah, resistance is something very draining.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're at the 1 hour mark, and I know we're a bit limited today. So just before we finish, maybe we can talk a little about the bands that you want to introduce to the audience.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say I just finished this wonderful tour with the band of mine, FÉMINA. For many years, they were a trio from the Patagonia, from San Martín de los Andes. Now one of the members of the band, Claridad, one of the original founders, she's decided to not continue with the band anymore. So we just did the tour with Clara and Sofia Truco, who are sisters. And we were touring all around Spain. And so this is one of their more popular songs, which means have a nice trip, which is Buen Viaje. So I have them very present in my mind and my heart right now because I just left them a few days ago. So happy to have been reunited with them and touring with them around Spain. And this song reminds me a lot of that trip. So we can play Buen Viaje.
De la realidad, las cosas que me sorprendían. Hoy en día ninguna me deslumbra de verdad. Los fantasmas que intento atrapar se me escabullen en los brazos. Tendría que aceptar mi realidad o pedirle a los astros que tengan piedad. Aquí estoy trabajando, no pierdo la dignidad. Con este hambre voraz queriendo siempre más y más, creyendo que algún día iba a poder saciar, fantaseando que en algún momento de la vida me crecerían alas para poder volar. Y a quien no le falta el aliento en este aposento de frivolidades, hay que estar atento para no pasarse de ingenuidades. ¿Quién le dijo que él y yo éramos rivales? Más bien amantes, correteamos por los valles incesantes. Creímos ser como la encina y el roble, permanecer unidos nos haría inmortales. Y así viví un amor de eternidades. Y así viví nuestro amor de eternidades. No quisiera desaparecer antes de mojarme otra vez los pies en la luna. No quisiera desaparecer antes de mojarme otra vez los pies en la luna. Creíste sabio sabiendo que lo lograrías. Sabía algo que no sabías. Vía a vía se te pasó el tranvía. Otra vez estás luchando contra la deriva. Quisiera desenmascarar al enmascarado, aquel que de su sed a ver el mundo conquistado. Se ha colocado una careta y no protesta. Patea a quien sea con tal de alcanzar su meta. Se me está haciendo difícil con usted interactuar. Trastabilla su lengüeta cada vez que intenta hablar. ¿Quién le dijo que él y yo éramos rivales? Más bien amantes, correteamos por los valles incesantes. Creímos ser como la encina y el roble, permanecer unidos nos haría inmortales. Y así viví un amor de eternidades. Y así viví nuestro amor de eternidades. No quisiera desaparecer antes antes de mojarme otra vez, los pies en la luna. No quisiera desaparecer antes de mojarme otra vez, los pies en la luna. No quisiera desaparecer antes de mojarme otra vez, los pies en la luna. No quisiera desaparecer antes de mojarme otra vez, los pies en la luna.
All right.
Awesome.
So let's go for the next band. There are more? How many bands?
Sure. I mean, I think there's really just 3 that I brought in. I just brought in a few tracks because I was just thinking about what's been important to me and my story, and if we're going to share some cool artists. I think one of the most important songs that's affected my life more than anything else is a song called Viene de Mi by La Yegros. It's a wild story. I'll share the abridged version because we could be here for a very long time. But when I moved to Argentina, I was working for a record label called ZZK Records or ZZK Records, which was an absolutely amazing opportunity. It was a collective of, I think, around 12 artists at the time that all sort of mix cumbia and folklore music from Argentina with electronic music. The label still exists, has an amazing roster, and many artists you guys may know, Nicola Cruz being one of them, Uji also, who I've been working with for many years. Chanja Villa Circuito is another one that's been around a lot. And at that time, the label was sort of run like a collective. So none of the artists had managers. It was just sort of my boss, Grant, and myself working with all of the artists, helping do their touring, press, all the label stuff, back catalog, like everything. So it was a really good experience and learning all different aspects of the business. And La Yegros was the one female artist in the collective, and we always worked very closely together. And then I decided to leave the label. The label was having some financial troubles, and so there wasn't going to be as much money for my salary at the time. And so I was like, okay, I guess I need to find a new job. And so I left the label, and with La Yegros, we always had a really sweet connection. We were like, oh no, like her solo album is about to come out that we worked so hard on. What a bummer. Hopefully we can work together in the future. And I left the label, and that's when I started my management company. Really on a kind of crazy whim, because it wasn't really my idea. I just loved living in Buenos Aires so much, and I loved my work with the label. It just wasn't financially feasible anymore. And so I had some great advice for some music colleagues who said, never work for free. Even if it's just a dollar or a small percentage, artists need to understand that your time is worth money from the beginning. And so I came up with a very basic structure. I thought, if this was my job that was paid very minimally and basic in Buenos Aires, I bet you if I work with a few bands and work for myself independently, I can at least make that amount of money and stay in Buenos Aires, which was my goal, and survive and still work in music, which I love. And so that's when I opened Free Radical Productions. At first, it was just a PayPal account and a little logo or a little PDF. And I started working with some artists. And Lula Cruza and Uji, who I still worked with many years, was the first one that was like, hey, you should manage us. And was like, oh, wow, okay, this is a crazy idea that I didn't think of. And so I thought, hey, if I just charge a small retainer per band, and I have just like a few bands, like 3 bands, I would at least make what I was making at the label, if not a little bit more. And that way I would have a little bit of money to cover my time for all of the artist development work, because if I just make a percentage on shows, who knows when that's ever going to come in. But I could at least cover my basic costs like I did at my other job. And then I could be my own boss and work with different bands. So I started the company for a few years. A few months. This was almost 11 years ago now.
This is how you started your entrepreneurial
This is how I started
journey?
my company, yeah. And so I was managing a few bands just for the first few months, and then I get a call. So La Yegros, her first album was supposed to come out, and she had this song that we're going to hear after this, Viene de Mi. that came out on a compilation as a single before her album came out, on a compilation called Future Sounds of Buenos Aires. And the song ended up becoming a huge hit, and especially in France, and was played on Radio Nova nonstop, and was sort of this overnight success that Warner Parlophone reached out to the label and was like, we want to sign her, this major label.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice.
I had just started this fledgling management company. I wasn't managing her, but I had helped manage the whole release leading up to it. And I got the call from our label investor who was just like, can you manage her? Can you go to France and meet with the label? Like, can you do this? And I was just like, oui, with my high school French. Luckily, I didn't have to negotiate the whole deal in French. But I remember the first time I heard this song, even when I was still working with the label, and I was like, wow, like I felt it in my whole body, chills. I was just like, there's something about this song. Like, this is a hit song. There's something about this song. And so from that song being a huge success, I ended up taking on La Yegros as my first very big management client. And we toured the world together for almost 5 years and went to over 30 different countries.
Crazy.
And really from this song,
Oh, let's play it.
Viene de Mi.
Yo no bailo la cumbia, abandono el suelo y me entrego al aire que vas dejando. Yo me convierto en tu deseo. Yo no rompí el cristal, fue la luna roja, la loba en celo. Fueron tus dedos que me tocaron y se volvieron. Viene de ti, viene de mí, viene del viento. No miento, es un sentimiento. Es un sentimiento. Viene de ti, viene de mí, viene del viento. No miento, es un sentimiento. Es un sentimiento. En San Fernando fumé un poquito. Fue lluvia seca, no fue delito. Y que no necesito a nadie, yo te preciso. Dime que no rompiste la madrugada, que no te fuiste, que despertar la próxima vez no será tan triste. Viene de ti, viene de mí, viene del viento. No miento, es un sentimiento. Es un sentimiento. Viene de ti, viene de mí, viene del viento. No miento, es un sentimiento. Es un sentimiento. Una luz, no más que una luz querida, una luz torcida que en el desierto cambió mi vida. Camaradas de rebelión, florcita macumba la despedida. No digas siempre, no digas nunca. Viene de ti, viene de mí, viene del viento. No miento, es un sentimiento. Es un sentimiento. Viene de ti, viene de mí, viene del viento. No miento, es un sentimiento. Es un sentimiento.
crazy song. I love this. It reminds me a lot of like Spanish salsa, more like this flamenco suffering, but there is something a bit different there, something South American.
Yeah, well, that's one of the most beautiful things about music from South America, I find, is that, especially you notice this a lot from Colombia, especially, but from everywhere. Cumbia originally is folkloric music from Colombia. This is an Argentine song that mixes cumbia, which has also become popular in Argentina and all
What is
throughout South
cumbia
America.
exactly?
Cumbia is a Latin rhythm. I wouldn't say I'm a musicologist to define it. It's similar to salsa, but it's noted for having the guido, which is that shaker, and that sort of classic like swing step is how you dance it. But there's a much more sort of rootsy, rustic cumbia that came out of Colombia, and then there became all these different digital cumbia. She was called like the queen of digital cumbia for a long time.
This is called digital cumbia. What's the reason?
Well, just because it was electronic music with cumbia, which in that moment, this came out. When did this come out? Like over 10 years ago. So there was a moment where electronic cumbia music was like new and fresh and was becoming a big thing, because one of the things that's interesting was specifically about Argentina is that Argentina is a weird place in that it's lots of European immigrants. It looks very white compared to the rest of Latin America. And a lot of them have European passports because of their grandparents from Italy or Spain or wherever. And so there was always in the history of Argentina this sort of rejection of Latin American culture, and that Argentines never wanted to be seen as Latin American because they were like the Europeans. They were like above it a bit. And what happened in the past years, and it was happening before I got there as well, but I really loved witnessing being in Buenos Aires in this moment in time where the young people thought folkloric music was cool for the first time. You know, it like got over that rejection period, and young artists were looking at rhythms from Latin America, rhythms from Argentina, native rhythms, you know, indigenous rhythms, and transforming them into something new and modern and hip to the dance floor. And so Zizek Records, really that label was like at the forefront and still is of that movement. And so it was really cool to witness. And I remember when I was studying, even before I moved back to Argentina, I saw a band Tremor, actually, who have an amazing song called Malambo, where Malambo is like traditional. It's like, I don't have it here, but I can send it to you. That's like, it's almost like Argentine Lord of the Dance, you know, where they do these foot dances and with drumming, and it's super traditional folk stuff, but they were doing like glitchy experimental electronic music with it. And it was super cool. And so for people who know Malambo, they were like, what is this? And obviously there's some people who love it and some people who don't. But they toured the world with that music as well, because it brought this folkloric culture to a dance floor palatable audience. And so it was really, I was so inspired by that movement and what was going on. So when I talk a lot about the Argentine underground music scene, that's what I was a part of. And that's what I wanted to help share, because I thought it was amazing. This sort of, you know, renaissance of folk culture mixed with electronic music. And now this is more common, but like a long time ago, this was the new thing, you know? And so it was an honor to like be of service to that movement and do whatever I could to help get these artists out and touring and sharing it. And sometimes it takes someone from abroad to really hold up a mirror to be like, this is crazy. Like, let's go, you know, because sometimes, you know, there's actually a great book on this with talking about Nortec Collective in Mexico, where they were playing traditional Mexican music, and only when they went abroad did Mexico appreciate this band from Mexico, you know?
Only when they left the country, they got more recognition.
Exactly, because then the Mexicans were like, hey, like they're playing norteño music from Mexico, you know? So sometimes it has that weird dynamic structure, or just even with any humans, that sort of rejection of like the music your parents would listen to,
Yeah.
you know? And so, or your grandparents would listen to, and then really bringing it around and having it be something new and fresh and taking ownership of the culture in that way. So it was a very cool time to be there.
It's so interesting how culture can affect songwriting and culture itself, you know, like, for example, this is something that really blew my mind. You know, on Spotify, you need to have 30 seconds to have a play. Someone actually played your song.
Yeah.
So what they do today, they make the intros at least 30 seconds, you know, so you can have something a bit longer. So you can have this, you can earn this one person who listen to the song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it changes the way you write songs.
Yeah.
It changes, everything is changing. And then also the way the culture is being at the moment, whatever is happening in the world, it creates some needs. And what I love about music is that you can say whatever you want. There is no filters in music. And you can just say whatever you really want to say. Some stuff that no one will ever dare saying them, like as a conversation that we're having right now.
Mm-hmm.
But music is kind of a place to put it there. And this is so beautiful when you really get underneath this the skin of the music to understand the culture, to understand what bubbled underneath everything that wanted to go up. Yeah, it's really crazy. So what will be the next song?
Let's see. I have, well, I want to give a big credit always to Uji, who has his track La Descarria, which is a track that he did with Karina Lawrence and Miss Bolivia. Uji, I have to give credit to as being one of the most important people in my life. He's a dear friend of mine, and we first met through his project Lula Cruza, which was actually the first band I started managing. And it was a band that I was always a fan of when I was working on Zizek. They had done some collaborations, but weren't officially signed to the label. And they had spent some time, they both went to Berkeley. It's a duo of Ale Ortiz and Luis Moret from Argentina, Ale from Colombia, Luis from Argentina. And they had spent time living in the US and actually had toured abroad pretty significantly in the West Coast and all of that. And we're doing an amazing film project with the famous videographer Vincent Moon. And I had heard about them and heard about their project. And when I moved to Argentina, I did an interview with them for some podcasts I was doing at the time. And we became friends and organized a few shows with them playing. But I was just always a huge fan of their project and their artistic vision. And Luis was the first one that I remember one of the days maybe the day of or the day after I left my job at the label, we were with Luis and we went to see Juana Molina, another amazing artist from Argentina. And we were just sitting around having a drink and he was like, oh, well, now that you left Zizek, you should be our manager and manage our big comeback because the singer, we'd taken a pause for her to have her baby. And I was like, yeah, maybe I should, ha ha ha. And we look at each other like, wait, really? Because like, that's kind of my dream. And so it didn't happen right away. At first I was like, okay, well, how am I managing an indie band in Argentina? Like, does this make any financial sense and all of that? And it was really his trust and his faith in me that made me who I am today. And I started managing Lula Cruza. The band has separated, so they aren't playing together anymore, but I worked with them for many years, and then they both basically split into two solo projects. Minuk, which is Alejandra and her partner Markandea, who's another amazing artist from Sweden, who have this other wonderful project, and Luis's solo project Uji, which I was still managing for many years now. As since the pandemic, he's focusing more on the Argentine market, so I just sort of do more little international things for him when it comes up, as opposed to full-time managing as I used to do. But I really I'm always a huge fan of him as a person. He's like family to me, also his project. And this was one of his more popular songs on the first album, which we can play.
Let's play it.
A mí me dicen, me dicen, me dicen, me dicen, me dicen. Me dicen, me dicen, me dicen la Descarria. Porque yo sé que soy hija del momento. Porque yo sé que soy en ningún lugar.
Tranquilito que se va. Mueva, mueva. Tranquilito que se va.
Me dicen de todo por vivir a mi modo. Me ensucio en esta vida como si fuera lodo. Lo pruebo, le doy y si falla me jodo. Voy siempre fiel a mi deseo, codo a codo. Me lleva el norte es mío. Lo escribo cada mañana, es mi desafío. Respiro, observo y confío. Y cuando llega la noche miro la luna y sonrío. Vida nómade, vida donde sea. Vida más liviana, vive a tu manera. Vive más tranquila, vive como quieras. Que nadie marque tu horizonte, ni la frontera. Vida sin jefe, vive sin patrón. A mí me marca el pulso, mi corazón. Me monto en el viento y en esta canción me dicen descarriada y yo digo revolución.
Ay, ay, ay. Así, así. A todas las pibas. La descarriada. Mijita.
And for the last song, which was actually the first song that started the podcast,
let's actually, you know what? Let's go with Trocitos de Madera because that's another song by La Yegros, which just has a very funny story. And is also another electro cumbia hit, one of her more popular tracks. The Trocito de Madera means little pieces of wood. And there was an article that came out in the newspaper saying that there was a girl that was crying little pieces of wood. And it was just like this weird freak story. And so she found the article, and with her producing partner, Gabby Carpel, they like made this funny song about it that turned into this one of her most popular songs, which was like from this article that they found, which is just so funny thinking about like these stories and where do they come from, and it falls into the hand of this person and it becomes a song then that she's singing in all these different countries all over the world.
It's
and
so
it's
random.
just so random, but very, very special. Always
It's very special. When it
life
happens.
keeping us on our toes,
Wow.
right? Yeah. So that's Trocito de Madera.
Cool. So this is for the first song. And just before we say goodbye, how can people contact you?
Yes, please do. I really love talking with artists and all different people, different music conversations. I'm always open. The best way to reach me, I'm on Instagram a lot. Viva Free Radical is my Instagram name, because that's the name of my company, Free Radical Productions. You can always also reach me on email. My website, alliesilver.com, ALLIESILVER.com. All my contact info and social networks are there. Instagram is usually how I most communicate with people, but happy to find people there. And also for those of you in Berlin, I guess next Thursday, I'm going to be a part of a free meetup event.
I think the episode will be released afterwards.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well,
But if
then
you have other events that
yeah, well, basically, well, then we can get rid of that. But yeah, I'm going to be here in Berlin till December. I'm going to be speaking and organizing the Women of the World event in A Coruña in Spain, end of October. And otherwise be around Berlin and hopefully doing more workshops and band therapies and just enjoying my time here before I head south for the winter.
amazing. Allie Silver, you're remarkable. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was
Thank
a lot
you
of
for
fun.
sharing all this beautiful knowledge. And I
My
hope
pleasure.
it was valuable for everyone who listened. If
Yes.
it was, just comment somewhere where you see it. Send Ali a message, comment on the podcast on Instagram, on Spotify. Let us know that you heard that we gave you value.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening
Goodbye,
and thanks
people.
for having me.